All right, Cathie Wood making waves again as we see a lot of action coming to you in terms of ETFs. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back to Tech Path. Lisa's back in the seat
I
today.
know it's been a while. I've missed you. I've thought about you, but the news and the hits keep coming. So we got to unpack them today, Paul. Let's get into it.
All right, so ARK and 21 shares have now kind of served up a little bit of an ETF platter here in terms of a futures ETF. So Cathie Wood's kind of like in this whole space of, hey, let's go all in. She seems to be surrounding Bitcoin like surrounding the wagons of some sort.
I mean, I think that she's very wise in that she recognizes that this is a multi-pronged approach that needs to be rolled out to ensure that, you know, as many tentacles in the Bitcoin arena that she can deploy, she deploys. This is kind of interesting though, because this is more of like a marketing play, right? Like in terms of the governance of the fund, like this is more 21 shares, just harnessing and leveraging the power of the ARK brand.
ARK 21 shares, let's go to the story here. Bitcoin Futures ETF, ticker ARKA, plans to invest in Bitcoin futures contracts that trade on commodity exchanges according to the Wednesday filing with the SEC, which is kind of interesting. The Alpha Architect, which is a white label issuer of ETFs, submitted the filing. What that simply means is 21 shares, which is also the affiliate of ZUG and we've actually reported on 21 shares here before. And it's kind of interesting in the sense that they are, meaning ARK, are providing the marketing support, but at the same time with ARKA, are looking to actually do investment on the aspect of, a full-blown commodity exchange approach, which I think is cool. I think it's just another step in the process of getting to a full-blown ETF.
Yep. And just to see the SEC and Gensler being, receptive to the idea of, futures, BTC futures and what have you is, again, to me, another indication that we're moving more towards adoption, even in like the realm of the government arena. To see him, and I mentioned this to you before, to see Gensler talking about like Bitcoin and its futures is another step in the right direction.
Yeah, I think with, we had Congressman Emmer on the show here just this week, so you guys probably have a chance to check the video out, but he was talking about that very issue, and that was with Gensler. Mainly what they were kind of alluding to was that the SEC had alternate agendas. And his little keyword was about these stable coins, which they're trying to essentially control at some point. And maybe that's the play here. I don't want to get into the SEC side of it with ETFs, but could that slow down the ETF overall with a traditional ETF where you're actually buying the underlying asset, which is the factor that a lot of people are looking at with Cathie. But man, she is just really
I love to see it. I love to see the presence that she's had and really creating this, niche for herself in relation to how many different ways ARK is looking to have a footprint. It's exciting, and it's only going to drive adoption. I mean, when you think about what it'll unlock, like the exposure to an entirely new user base, like this is where things start to get interesting in terms of how Q4 is going to shape up.
Yeah. So this is another piece of this story. Their flagship innovation ETF was the top performing U.S. equity fund last year. Basically, I said Bitcoin will rally to 500,000. She called that at the SALT conference. Her investment holds at about 1.5 billion worth of cryptocurrency exchange. Coinbase, which she actually sold some of Coinbase the other day. So that would be interesting. I'm wondering if she is softer on some of the non-directly related underlying asset companies, like in this particular case, Coinbase, where you've got maybe an opportunity to go into an ETF futures play where you're just, you're betting on the, whether it's the long or the short, or is she positioning for something bigger?
I mean, listen, I think in June of this year, she had announced that ARK was considering, had already submitted an application to the SEC for an ETF. And the truth is that, like, what you've seen in Canada was the first country to launch a Bitcoin ETF. Within days, it had generated over $500 million. And so there's a lot of money being left on the table that I don't think that needs to be left on the table.
Well, I think when you look at companies like 21 Shares, they're what they're trying to do, at least in Europe. And that's the thing. What you're talking about is like the Canadian ETFs who are already active, both Ethereum and Bitcoin. You've got obviously 21 Shares and ZUG which is not Zuck, but Zug. I think when you see that kind of activity and that kind of dedication already happening in other countries, which a lot of people think we're way behind the eight ball here
well,
in
there's
terms
a
of
blueprint,
regulatory.
right? There's a proof of concept that's been rolled out, and in addition to Canada, you've also got Dubai. So you've got other countries that are recognizing there's a lot of value to be unlocked here, and the United States, to some degree, is a laggard, which is which is not usually our stance. Our horse in the race is usually a front runner, but we'll keep sharing the news as to why it is that we need to be more progressive and innovative as far as our adoption. But that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, I wonder.
That's every story here we take.
I'm kind of curious, when you guys, maybe you found the show and you're looking at doing something on Bitcoin, or maybe you're looking for more education around how just in general crypto and blockchain work. I'm kind of curious, are you holding out for, if you're not invested in cryptocurrency right now, are you holding out for an ETF? So, because there's a lot of people that say that many of the institutional funds, a lot of the whale money, a lot of family offices, et cetera, are really, there's a lot of money on the sidelines,
Yeah. I mean, I think
in
that,
terms of where it's going.
but this is a part of the issue with crypto in general, just adoption and just the barrier to entry associated with, like, how do you procure it? How do you buy it? Like, bypassing that altogether and being able to invest in the entities that are doing it for you. I mean, that's always very appealing. And having, the backing of, like, regulation, and having the backing of organizations that, like, you can trust and entrust with your funds. I mean, that makes it a lot easier to jump in.
Yeah. And I think the key here will be, as we start to see the bigger entities really starting to move into ETF, and we've talked about this on the show before a couple of times, is that we still anticipate that we could see an ETF this year. If that jumps into the bull market.
To the moon?
Then how? And I think at that point, it's just, everybody's just going to try to hold on for dear life.
Well, I mean, closing out the year at 100,000, closing out the year at 500,000. Right. I mean, all of these, astronomical numbers. I think it's very difficult for people to see kind of how and what will lead to that kind of run up. But when you see things like this happening in the market, it's an indication there are possibilities.
Yeah, big possibilities
to make it happen.
I wanted to jump to our Bitcoin chart, because this is kind of a good example of why I think some of these ETFs are maybe having some impact on it. If you look at where we are, we've been tracking this back since literally all the way back in August, really kind of narrowing in and isolating in on sentiment. And each time we've started to call these, and remember, when we layer in these sentiment analysis tools, you'll get basically a map right here that's forecasting the growth and the movement. And each one of these has been pretty much on point, with the exception of this little call out right here on Bitcoin, where it basically jumped up right here outside our zone, which was the 57 high that was earlier this week, and then kind of lined back in. And look at this, we talked about this yesterday. Right there, that dip literally was already pre-forecasted here on where sentiment was. One thing though, and this is what makes me think that with an ETF, we'll see massive movement in the market. Back to this chart, I want to show a data point here. Noobs being new wallets, less than 30 days old.
I asked that question too.
Yeah, 21.9% of the sentiment. So 22% of the sentiment that is being hauled in on Bitcoin right now, setting at 78.99, which is a very overheated number. So that worries me a little bit in terms of
the momentum.
The momentum for new wallets, new investors. And if you get movement on an ETF like what Wood is trying to do, along with many others, Valkyrie, and you name the list, if someone does get unhitched here, and even to the point where some of these futures trading ETFs do very well, my concern is we're going to see a lot more new wallet entry into the marketplace.
Why is that a concern, though?
All right, so new wallet means weekends, in my opinion. So people are going to get back in, much like in the highs where a lot of people came in at 50, in the 55 to 62 mark. Okay. That's why we saw so much sell-off of new wallets at that 62 high, which could cause those kinds of crashes. Now, could that happen at 75 or maybe at 85 or even at 100 if we see the ETF come about towards the end of the year? That's the question.
I mean, I think that the bottom line is that this is an opportunity to, provide access to folks that are on the sidelines right now. And I think that when you look at just the volatility associated with Bitcoin, it can be difficult for folks that are like, more risk averse to be invested directly because the volatility just doesn't agree with them. And so having this kind of like safe haven of sorts is a very, I think, bullish indicator. And
but even the ETFs, I think they would get a little. They would start if you got an ETF truly approved. If ARK was, let's say, the first one. Let's just pin up an example. ARK puts the first one out. You're going to see massive volatility because of just the fact that it's Cathie Wood.
Wow.
All right. So Royalty, soon to be Bitcoin Royalty, gets out there, throws in her towel for an ETF, drives the market literally through the moon. If you're not a sophisticated investor, you could get caught in a little bit of a downswing, which is a little bit troublesome.
But I think just getting people to be that are on the sidelines vested, even indirectly for the long term, obviously if you're a short-term trader, it's a different kind of market. You can expect more volatility, but I think long term, this is only going to help to get to us to that six-figure.
Would you, it's hard to say because you and I are, we're immersed in it, but I'm just curious, maybe some of you investors out there, would you go into an ETF? Because like ARK has many ETFs right now that you can jump into. I'm invested in one, full disclosure, and often I will look at ARK in general. When I look at their innovative fund, in many cases, it's always on the chopping block. Like right now, it's always on the chopping block of a sell because of the lower performance. Back to the point of if, let's say, Bitcoin goes to 100K, and an ETF comes in maybe November or December or in the first of the year, and Bitcoin is still running, and the ETF pops that, you're going to see the market correction at some point.
Of course, I think
so would you sell your ETF?
No,
because you're based on underlying asset. No. So your value of your ETF.
I think that the ETF would be a hedge for me. So it would be a bit of a hedge. Yeah, I totally, because I would think that I would obviously I have a position in Bitcoin directly, but I think the ETF is just another way to kind of shelter your funds and give them an opportunity to appreciate over time. I would trade my Bitcoin to much more. There'd be much more trading velocity associated with the direct investment in Bitcoin versus the ETF, where I would just let it sit and just do its thing.
Even though it's being devalued.
Yeah, because I think that in
because if you go into the bear,
I think 18 months it'll be a different story.
Well, you mean out of the bear market?
Yeah.
Okay, beyond this bear market coming.
Yeah. I think that I have a long-term play, so I don't look at things in terms of 12 months, 24 months. I'm Bitcoin.
Well, the key there will be where Bitcoin actually settles in the bear market. If it goes to a 125 high driven by ETF activity, and if you are invested in ETF, because remember, those are the investors that are coming in that typically had never invested in crypto before, and if they get weak on it, then next thing you've got.
Do you think that these ETFs will implode though? Do you really think that they'll implode? Implode?
Well, I think I don't think they implode. It's much like what happened
Bitcoin crashes.
Yeah, it's much like what happened with Cathie Wood's situation when ARK was falling dramatically. Everybody on Wall Street was essentially saying Cathie's over. Okay. No, you had Jim Cramer and Squawk and all of them looking at what was happening. Now,
when in doubt, zoom out is all I have to say.
Granted, when you look at ARK's fund over 3-5 years,
there you have it.
That's a different scenario. That goes back to Bitcoin maximalism, which is hold forever.
Yeah.
Okay. But a lot of people don't have that kind of stomach when they're just coming into the market. That's my point. That's my point.
Okay, I see where you're coming from.
Yeah, because those are going to be some weekends in there.
Yes, it's to be expected, and nothing will go, keep running up. It's only healthy for there to be a correction.
Yeah.
This is important for people to realize. Nothing goes straight up forever.
Exactly.
So brace yourself. Downturn is coming.
And I think the key here, when we see Bitcoin moving in this direction, whether it is ETF driven, or it's other news driven, or if we see just the unhook of some sideline capital moving into the market. And of course, remember, futures could start to move this as well, just in the sense that a lot of times when people bet on futures and at the same time, they on the backside will go out and buy the underlying asset.
Right.
So that's going to create a little bit of volume anyway. So that in itself, I think, starts to get into those kind of scenarios.
I think movement is good. Movement into the marketplace is very good, and it's going to be interesting to see how this shakes out. But I am very excited about the direction things are moving in, because I'm crypto in general long, but to see what's going on with Bitcoin and also here's another thing, market psychology. right? Like when you start seeing Bitcoin in relation to, the SEC, I'm going to go back to this point because I feel like it's so critical, and there being an approval associated with Bitcoin and the breath of, Gensler. That's a very exciting change
Yes.
in talk about market sentiment. Because the public narrative is like, oh, okay, well, now they're starting to consider ways to govern this asset.
Yes and no. When we had Congressman Emmer on, he mentioned that issue, which is really for the outset of regulation to occur. The likelihood is the SEC may give some approvals for an ETF, but it doesn't necessarily pull the brakes off of crypto in general because they're still concerned in DC.
Certainly not, but it's a step in the right direction.
Oh, sure, for sure. Even these are a step in the right direction in the ETF futures. But the idea is that he thinks, meaning Congressman Emmers, was saying, hey, watch out because really the midterms are going to either one, reposition the financial community in DC that are making a lot of these kinds of decisions to help us look at some regulatory rails that would either one, rail in or reel in the SEC, rail in, we would love to do that with them, but reel in the SEC and get at least some clarity moving, which is, back to the whole point of where this is going to fall in timing. So anyway, so we're going to be doing these market movers from time to time. The idea with these are we'll get you a little bit of data, try to give you guys some insights in terms of some of the analysis of the news, but not investment advice. Mainly the number one thing you guys need to do is go out and do your own research. If you're listening in over on the podcast, number one thing to do is subscribe over there. It's the best way you can reach us.
And of course, if you're watching us on YouTube, keep watching us. Make sure you're subscribing, click that bell so that you can get notified every time we release a new video. Look, at the end of the day, the more knowledge you have, the more opportunity you have to make better investment decisions.
For sure.
What?
For sure.
So we want to make sure that you have the information that you need to know to move wisely.
Yeah. Hey, you guys haven't jumped into the diamond circle yet? I'm hearing like maybe.
You talking about the diamond circle? When am I like? I got to get in on this action.
Anytime.
If you're not in the diamond circle, I want to see it in the comments because you and I and everyone else, like we need to understand what's going on and how he picks these to the moon exponential altcoins. I'm curious. Are you?
Yeah. So you guys can jump in. It's absolutely free to you. Just follow the link in the description below. It's going to take you into our website. You jump into the Diamond Circle, that's where you're going to get both education coming back to you on some of our insights on some of those kinds of projects. And in addition, it's also where we're doing our airdrops. And that means money back to our audience.
Airdrops?
So back to the community. So you guys make sure and join. It's free. You can't miss it. Come on, man.